Lucas Dow, thank you so much for joining me. You're being prosecuted for allegedly providing false or misleading information in your annual return on the mine, in particular for not saying you'd cleared some land for things like access tracks to some bores. What do you reckon? Is that a fair cop and, it's fair enough that you go to court?
Well, good evening, Andrew. Well, as you pointed out, late yesterday we received notification from the Queensland Government that they were seeking to prosecute Adani on the basis of an administrative error that we actually self-identified and self-reported in September of last year. Despite the fact that all of the works undertaken on site had complied with our authorities and our conditions, so there was no environmental harm, we complied with all of our environmental authorities. We acknowledged we'd made an administrative error in the report, and we self-identified, notified the department of that in September of last year, and yet the government seeks to pursue a prosecution on this case.
Now, why do you think that is?
Oh, look, Andrew, ultimately they're there as the regulator. I mean, the piece I think we really wanted to make crystal clear is that we're out there and we're striving to do everything in accordance with all of our conditions, and all of our physical work has been undertaken. I might also add the Queensland Government actually acknowledged that there'd been a number of baseless claims that had alleged that we'd undertaken illegal drilling and illegal clearing. The Queensland Government and the Federal Government have both cleared us of both of those aspects. So it's really just this self-notified administrative error that the Queensland Government's now pursuing us in relation to.
I know you noticed you're trying to keep the temperature low on this one, but you did nothing wrong to the land. What you actually did on the land was what you were permitted to do. You simply forgot to tell the government some of this work that you'd done. You identified it, you reported it, and you're still going to court. That seems a little bit over the top, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, so again, we've only just received that information late yesterday, so we've got our legal team working through that, and ultimately we'll respond to the Queensland Government. As you rightly said, all of the physical work undertaken on site has been in accordance with our conditions and approvals, so we've done absolutely nothing wrong there. We did have an administrative error where there were 3 weeks of reporting requirements that had been missed. The moment that we identified that we'd had an issue, we notified the department, and that was in September of last year. So we're seeking to engage with the department and effectively work through this prosecution that landed on our doorstep late yesterday.
You don't think someone's playing funny buggers and trying to nobble you and trying to punish you and make an example of you?
Oh, I'd certainly hope not. Again, all we've ever really asked for is a fair go and to be treated like everyone else. So, ultimately, I expect what our lawyers will be looking for is there precedents, or have others been that have found themselves in a similar situation where there's just been an administrative error? What's been the approach and the manner in which the Queensland Government's responded? So again, we'd just be seeking not to be treated any differently to anyone else. We acknowledged we'd had an error. We stood up, we addressed it, we've made changes to our internal protocols to prevent a recurrence. From our perspective, we thought the matter was closed. The Queensland Government's clearly got a different view. We'll work through that and endeavour to get an appropriate resolution.
Very diplomatically put. I think you might be being set up a bit here, but there you go. Now, look, Lucas Dow, you're also being criticised, Adani, for having asked for the names of CSIRO scientists who were reviewing your groundwater plans some while back when you're still waiting for a final approval. Why did you do that?
Oh, Andrew, really the key was just to ensure that there was transparency through the process. People that had followed our case closely would have realised that we'd been subjected to some tortuous processes, including a black-throated finch review that was initiated by the Queensland Government, was led by an individual who in turn leads an organisation that has got a clear anti-coal, anti-mining, anti-Adani sentiment. So really we were just ensuring that and wanted to ensure that that there was appropriate transparency and independence with the CSIRO undertaking that work. We'd been categorical in terms of our support for the CSIRO undertaking that work, and really we were just seeking some transparency in that regard.
Right, you were seeking in a sense to see whether they were actually activists, because as we all know now, who have been following it, the Queensland Environment Department, which by the way is the one that is now taking you to court, had of course hired as advisors activists such as Kirsten Lovejoy, 3 times Greens candidate and anti-coal campaigner, and also Tim Seelig, another anti-coal and anti-Liberal campaigner who led the Queensland Conservation Council. Is that the kind of thing that makes you suspicious whenever you get hauled up before a court or told to produce, told to jump through another hoop by the Queensland Labor government?
Well, ultimately, Andrew, really what we were seeking was just to have transparency around the process. We'd been transparent in terms of who was involved preparing our management plans, all the activities that we had to undertake. We didn't think it was an unreasonable request. We provided that to the Federal Department of Environment and Energy. They were ultimately engaging CSIRO. It was for them to make that determination. Once again, we weren't alleging any bias. We just wanted to ensure that there was transparency in the process, and that was on the basis upon which we had written to the Federal Department.
Well, I can understand you being gun-shy given the past, and of course they didn't provide the names, but some of the information got out. The protests lately now in Brisbane, again today, by climate alarmists and anti-Adani campaigners, supergluing themselves to the road, holding up the traffic. Do they bother you? Do you think, oh, here we go again, you know, an attempt to stir up the public and the Labor will collapse and give in to this and go for you?
Well, Andrew, we've always said, you know, the great thing about living in a democracy is that people can have differing views. All we'd ever ask is that those things are done, if people are going to protest, that they're safe, they're legal and respectful. And realistically, I don't think any of those three measures are being met with the latest activity that's been occurring, particularly in the Brisbane CBD. You know, it'd be my sense, and when I've been moving out and about, I think they're probably doing more harm than good to their own cause. And I think, you know, certainly up in the regions, there's some solutions for removing people that have superglued themselves to the road that North and Central Queensland is probably a little different to how the police are going about it.
Well, that's another question again for the will of the Queensland Labor government to actually solve this issue and expedite matters for you and other people that are putting hard money into Queensland's economy. Personally, Lucas, I think they should, if they superglue themselves to the road, they should be allowed to stay there overnight. Let's see how long they last before they're begging for a toilet break. Lucas Dow, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thanks, Andrew. Have a great night.